The hits just keep on coming against P. Diddy, with a string of new civil lawsuits filed against the embattled music icon just this week. But Diddy isn't the only one who's facing some major allegations. Two of his sons, Justin and Christian Combs, are both name-dropped in several civil suits that list Diddy as a defendant. And the accusations against them are pretty serious.
The fall of Diddy's empire is unfolding faster than anyone thought possible. And now, it's no longer just about him, because everything is crashing down on his sons too. The name Combs, which once stood for global success and generational wealth, is now tied to scandals so dark and disturbing that
allegations against 54-year-old Sean Diddy Combs have dominated headlines for more than a month, and he spent most of that time at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, held on some pretty severe federal charges. Just last month, he was indicted by a grand jury on charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. By now, you're familiar with the allegations against Diddy, from gun and drug trafficking to running a years-long sex trafficking scheme. There's honestly too many allegations against him to list. According to some reports, there are thousands of people who say they were assaulted by Diddy. All that remains to be seen, but we do know there are more than a dozen civil suits already filed against him, with more than 100 new suits expected to follow. The pattern throughout all these lawsuits is eerily similar. Diddy and his team would allegedly drug or spike the drinks of victims before Diddy and sometimes others sexually assaulted them. There are also allegations that Diddy forced these victims to have sex with prostitutes as he touched himself. He called these situations freak-offs, and oftentimes he recorded them. Here's where some of the allegations against his son Justin Combs come in. So all this takes us back to February, when Rodney Jones, also known as the producer Lil Rod, filed civil suit against Diddy. In his lengthy lawsuit, Lil Rod straight name-drops Justin Combs, describing him as someone who solicits prostitutes, underage girls, and sex workers. There's actually a picture of Justin Combs with an allegedly underage girl shown in the lawsuit. Now, in this specific instance, Lil Rod alleges at least one underage girl came to Diddy's home for a listening party. A sex worker was also apparently solicited, and a freak-off ensued. As an aside, this is the same night that Lil Rod alleges Diddy forced him to take a laced shot. He started to feel lightheaded and then woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, naked next to a sex worker. It's important to note Justin Combs is listed as a defendant on this case because, according to Lil Rod, he facilitated Diddy's alleged RICO accusations against Justin Combs too, for his involvement in an alleged shooting cover-up. According to court documents, it happened on September 12, 2022, outside Diddy's Chalice Studios. Lil Rod says Diddy, his son Justin, and Justin's friend who went by G were all there when things got heated. Lil Rod says he heard multiple gunshots ring out and later found G on the bathroom floor in the fetal position. Lil Rod says he was bleeding out of his hip and leg area. Lil Rod says he was applying pressure to G's wounds and then asked the crowd to call an ambulance. At that point, both Diddy and Justin Combs disappeared to another part of the studio. Diddy then gave strict instructions to inform the police that he had nothing to do with the shooting. He also forced Mr. Jones to lie to the police by telling them that G was shot standing outside the studio by a drive-by assailant.
Insiders say major executives can't sleep at night, watching the headlines break minute by minute. This isn't a slow downfall. It's a supernova implosion happening in real time, and every single person, even slightly connected, is scrambling, hoping they don't become collateral damage as the empire burns to ash. What started as whispers about Diddy's private lifestyle has turned into a relentless storm of accusations, raids, lawsuits, and explosive testimonies. It's as if every secret ever hidden behind those iron gates of luxury is now bursting out for the world to see. And the most devastating twist? His own sons, Justin King Combs, Christian Combs, and Quincy, are no longer being seen as innocent bystanders. The narrative is violently shifting. These boys are now being dragged into the deepest part of the scandal pool, finger-pointed not just as family beneficiaries, but as alleged participants, witnesses, facilitators, and cover-up artists. A nightmare scenario no billionaire brand builder ever imagined being written into their family history. Insiders say the investigators who started closing in on Diddy months ago have widened their net, and what they reportedly uncovered horrified even veteran law enforcement. Allegedly, private recordings connect Diddy's sons to hush money payments, NDA agreements, and covert deals designed to keep explosive truths buried.
NDA specific allegation involves Diddy's son Justin, but another allegation and entirely separate civil lawsuit involves his other son Christian, or King Combs. Grace Omar K alleges that Christian Combs sexually assaulted her on a yacht in December 2022, and she says it was facilitated by Diddy. Diddy had rented the yacht around Christmas time, and Omar K says it was a revolving door of high-profile celebrities and sex workers who were often passed out on the ship's deck. The lawsuit says there were liquor bottles all over, and it was difficult to distinguish which ones were laced with drugs. Omar K alleges that on December 28, 2022, while working as a yacht deckhand, she was sexually assaulted by a heavily intoxicated Christian Combs, who physically assaulted her and allegedly forced her to perform oral sex on him. Since these suits were filed, both Justin and Christian Combs were seen in federal court at their father's appearance just last week. But could they too face charges? Here's where we bring in former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani. So, talking about P. Diddy, I know we're talking about the crazy amount of allegations against him that are pretty shocking just unto themselves. But then there's also two of his children whose names have come up a bit throughout some of these civil lawsuits. We've seen headlines, both Justin and Christian Combs. Just to start right off the bat, what are you thinking about that, the inclusion of both of Diddy's sons and the accusations against those two?
I think that if we're talking about additional charges and additional defendants, those are probably two of the more likely. And Christian, of course, was the subject of a civil lawsuit where there was a sexual assault allegation naming him directly. So I think if we're going to cast a bit of a wider net, people are talking about family members, other celebrities, maybe some employees like Christina Forum, but I think the most likely would be those two sons.
Why do you think it's the most likely about those two? Just because of the recordings, the allegations against him? What are you thinking?
I think so. I think obviously they're just civil allegations and those cases are going to be put on hold while the criminal case plays out. But, there is some smoke there. And obviously, there's a presumption of innocence and there's a lower standard in a civil case. But you have someone who's been named directly as someone who participated in a sexual assault, and everything else has been rumors and speculation. But here you at least have one verified complaint.
And you know what's interesting about this situation? It's the sexual assault civil allegation filed by Grace Omar K. This is against Christian Combs, as you're referring to it. And Diddy is a co-defendant in this case because she says he facilitated it. It was on a yacht that Diddy had rented. But it was Christian, the one who allegedly sexually assaulted her. I mean, so how does all of that relate? The fact that we have Diddy, who's also part of this, but it's mostly on Christian in this instance?
Yeah, in this particular instance, like you said, it did take place on a yacht. She was someone who was working at the time, and Little Rod was there apparently, and obviously he's a plaintiff in a civil lawsuit himself. But whenever you are a plaintiff in a civil case, you obviously want to go after someone with the ability to pay. That's what we call a deep pocket. So even though Diddy might not have personally participated in this alleged incident, you really want to wrap him in as a co-defendant because obviously his ability to pay any judgment is going to be very different than Christian or Justin or any of the other of his 7 children.
Do you think that Grace Omar K, the plaintiff in this...
Destroyed devices, cover-ups of disturbing incidents that took place in penthouses, on private jets, and during secret VIP parties at luxury hotels, involving models, influencers, and other high-profile children of celebrities. What was once shrugged off as rich kid wilding has now turned into something far more sinister. Prosecutors are allegedly digging to see if these boys helped facilitate luring people into environments that later became case evidence. If that's true, it shifts the family's image from scandal to organized conspiracy. The reaction across the entertainment industry has been full-scale panic. Labels are freezing contracts, halting projects, and dropping music from playlists. Fashion brands are scrubbing old promo campaigns. PR firms are sending urgent crisis emails every hour of the day. Executives are frantically deleting files, combing through old texts, desperate to ensure nothing linking back to those private parties ever surfaces. Because if even one of Diddy's sons is formally charged, or worse, decides to flip in order to save himself, the domino effect will be catastrophic. Billion-dollar companies could crumble. Entire brands could be wiped out overnight from a single confession.
Yacht criminal or civil lawsuit, rather. Do you think that the feds would reach out to her and ask her about her experience, perhaps?
I do, and this is why. Apparently, and obviously I haven't heard them, she has recordings of this incident, audio recordings, and we know how powerful video evidence is. We've talked about it with Cassie Ventura and how that really maybe even shift the direction of this case entirely, because of course Combs denied everything until CNN got a hold of that video in May. And we're talking about a lawsuit that was filed in April, I believe, and again, I don't know if it's true, but the allegations are that much of this was recorded in this audio recordings. And if so, and she's saying no, and Christian is moving forward anyway, then you have attempted sexual assault.
Talking about audio and video recordings, that's what's huge in this case. I mean, we heard a lot about it from Cassie and her lawsuit, then of course Lil Rod, and now confirmed in the federal indictment that the feds are saying, yep, we've got some, and that's what led to this indictment and his charges. But what's interesting is that in Lil Rod's lawsuit, he actually has photos, like screenshots of a recording of Justin Combs, and he says it's allegedly with a sex worker. Do you think that part is incriminating too, that the feds may be looking at that recording?
I do. And during Combs' initial appearance before the new judge, Subramanian, there was some discussion of this, and Christian and Justin were in court as well, supporting their father. But the feds were talking about the 96 different electronic devices they seized and the terabytes and terabytes of data. Now, some of it might not be relevant, but some of it may be very much on point, because going back to Cassie's original allegation, Combs reportedly recorded many of these sex acts. It might have been for his sexual pleasure. It might have been to maintain control over the participants. But whether it's a voluntary recording, whether it's a hotel security camera, whether it's something that Lil Rod, took in a still video or a recording, or whether it's something that a civil plaintiff, a victim of sexual assault, I try not to name them, even though she did out herself in the complaint, took without the knowledge of Christian or others. It's all very, very powerful, because oftentimes when you're dealing with sexual assault and sexual abuse, these are things that happen behind closed doors, right? Could be at a home, could be at a hotel. In this case, could be on a yacht. And usually there aren't a whole lot of witnesses to it. So you will have a he said, she said type situation in many, many cases. Well, a recording can really change that narrative, because again, it can really corroborate the story of one side or the other.
In regards to Justin specifically and these alleged recordings, audio, all of that, so that's in relation to Lil Rod's lawsuit. He's actually a co-defendant listed quite a few times throughout this. And in addition to him sitting next to this alleged prostitute, we have that photo. There's also allegations that he actually partook in these freak-offs and potentially drugged women. This is something Lil Rod is saying. How would the feds go about proving something like that? I know that's the pattern we've seen across a lot of these civil suits, that women allege Diddy, for instance, drugged them. But now Lil Rod's also pointing the finger at Justin Combs, saying he drugged some of these women. How would the feds then go to look further into that?
Yeah, Lil Rod's lawsuit is interesting in that there are many defendants. We talked about Christina Horam, right? Some of the allegations that came out in Lil Rod's lawsuit was Christina, of course, being Combs' right-hand woman. She allegedly had the fanny pack with the drugs that were provided to the sex workers. There are the allegations directly against Justin as well. So whenever you're proving something like this, obviously, you're going to rely on the testimony of witnesses. It could be an independent witness, because sex workers, even though they're participants in a sex act, they won't necessarily be charged, or I don't think they're going to be defendants in the lawsuit, if the allegation is that they were forced to perform these sex acts and it wasn't just a commercial transaction. So
Justin Combs, once shining on red carpets as the heir to Bad Boy Records, is now being whispered about in industry circles, with claims that he helped run communications and security at certain controversial gatherings. Christian Combs, who modeled himself as the new generation version of Diddy, branding himself as King Combs, has gone dead silent on social media. Sources say he is terrified. Quincy, who is always considered the cleanest of them all, the actor, the calm one, is now seeing his own name dragged through the mud, simply for being in places where now exposed secrets were allegedly shared. Shaken insiders reveal that the sons are begging family lawyers day and night, desperately trying to understand if they can be prosecuted, and what, if anything, they can do to escape years in prison. That's how bad it's gotten. As this horrifying saga explodes, the public is witnessing a real-life empire collapse, brick by brick. Properties are being quietly liquidated. Business partners are running for cover. Think pieces are being written with titles like The Fall of a Dynasty or From Mogul to Monster. Fan pages are either abandoning ship or transforming into anti-Combs expose hubs. The very blogs that once begged for access to the Combs mansions are now digging up old footage, showcasing how the sons flexed private jets, jewels, and mansion parties like they were untouchable, never realizing those very flexes would become evidence in the court of public opinion.
And they confirm that the government, quote, has turned over many terabytes of data, including search warrant affidavits. Think about how much material that is. So when you think about that, when you think about how much material has been turned over to the defense, and maybe will still have to be turned over, it is still amazing to me that the defense will be ready for a May 2025 trial. But I tell you what, just keep that in mind. Keep that date in mind for a second. Now, during this hearing this week, there has also been a discussion about Brady material. Now, Brady material is relevant evidence that is favorable to the defense, potentially exculpatory evidence, tending to prove a defendant did not commit the crime. And this is evidence that the prosecution finds out about and has to turn over to the defense. And in their joint letter to the court in anticipation of this hearing this week, the defense argued, quote, that the Brady disclosures failed to meet the minimum constitutional standards to which Mr. Combs is entitled. And so during the hearing, Judge Subramanian asked the prosecution, can you tell me how you're complying with the Brady obligations? To which Assistant United States Attorney Emily Johnson reportedly responded that they are endeavoring to get the defense the information they're requesting, including interrogations the prosecution conducted, and also told the court that they had given the defense files from Victim 1. Now, based on the description of Victim 1 in the indictment and prosecution filings, this is the victim, by the way, who makes up the sex trafficking charge. I think a fair argument would be that is probably Cassandra Ventura. So when there is a discussion of turning over evidence regarding Victim 1, potentially Cassandra Ventura, and exculpatory evidence regarding Victim 1, I have to wonder if this relates back to the argument presented by the defense over the past several months that there is no evidence that Victim 1 is a victim of sex trafficking, rather that she and Combs had this consensual, years-long, toxic, violent relationship. And when you look at the 2016 video that I mentioned before, the defense would say this is not evidence that he was sex trafficking her, but this was just a very unfortunate, disturbing domestic spat. Now, the prosecutors have asserted that there was a sex worker in that hotel room that she was allegedly escaping from, and so this is a prime example of sex trafficking. But going back to what this exculpatory information might be regarding Victim 1, Combs' lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, seemed to confirm that in this hearing, this might be what's going on, because he apparently said to the judge, if what happened in Mr. Combs' bedroom was found to be entirely personal, we'd view that as subject to Brady. Now, to be clear, we don't know exactly what exculpatory Brady material is being referred to, but I think a fair assessment would be if they're trying to say that everything was consensual, maybe toxic, but consensual between Cassandra Ventura or Victim 1 and Sean Combs, that's exculpatory. Okay, moving on. Also in this hearing, there was an important discussion about a superseding indictment. You see, it's been reported that the prosecutors here have been presenting evidence to a grand jury and that this investigation is ongoing. So it is possible that Combs could be hit with new or amended charges. And so Judge Subramanian asked AUSA Johnson more about this. The judge asked, what can you tell me about your ongoing investigation and any superseding indictment? Now, AUSA Johnson reportedly replied, I can't say much. We're mindful of the trial date, and any additional charges will have little discovery information? What does that mean? Does it seem to suggest that if we bring charges, it wouldn't make a major change in the case? Maybe suggesting it wouldn't necessarily require a change in the trial date? So is it possible that means just...
Those flashy flexes might soon serve as visual exhibits in future cases, connecting the sons to a lifestyle prosecutors say was funded by silencing victims and erasing evidence. Worst of all, authorities are leaking hints that more is coming. They reportedly have sealed testimonies naming additional members of the Combs' inner circle, people allegedly paid to procure, cover, facilitate, and intimidate. And at the center of that spiderweb, the sons are being named over and over. Not as children, not as bystanders, but as grown men in their 20s who knew what was happening and chose to help keep the system running. In Hollywood, where reputation is everything, the impact is nuclear. Stadium deals ripped away. Hosting gigs canceled. Commercials pulled. Network shows stripped overnight. The Combs family name, once stamped across water bottles, cologne, liquor, fashion,